I see that most people have joined the session. Again, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in the Android Malware webinar. A couple of housekeeping items before we start. At the end of the webinar, we have a question and answer session. So feel free to submit any questions you might have during the presentation through the Q&A box in the Zoom control panel at the bottom of your screen. And throughout the presentation, please look out for QR codes at the top right corner of your screen, which you can scan for more information about the presented topic. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sending all registrants an on-demand version of this presentation tomorrow. Lastly, I do have an exclusive announcement for you. We're going to launch the DexGuard malware protection feature in May. But as you will see through the presentation, you do not need to wait to be able to protect yourself against malware, as you can also do it yourself. Now that is out of the way, let us begin. Welcome to this webinar on Android malware, how it works, and how to protect your application against it. My name is Brian, Product Marketing Manager at Guardsquare, and together with me is my colleague Gerardo from the Security Research Team.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Gerardo. In today's agenda, we will briefly explore malware and its impact on the financial services industry, its evolution, and its common attack techniques before presenting a handful of countermeasures you and your team can implement to protect your Android application against each attack technique. First and foremost, let's define what is malware. By definition, it is a software designed to disrupt, damage, or gain unauthorized access to a particular system. There are many types of malware, and it is quite difficult to pin down the landscape as it is quite diverse. Attack targets can range from specific end users to general population to specific countries. For example, on one hand, there is Pegasus, which is a type of malware designed to infect multiple applications to target specific high-profile people. On the other hand, there is also Brestex, which is another type of malware that exploits services on a device to maliciously transfer money to themselves, effectively targeting a broad audience. Pegasus is tailored towards a specific person and is very difficult to protect against. Brestex, on the other hand, hides as Android accessibility services, which end users download when they do not have proper awareness of the situation. There are also many fake apps such as flashlights or optimization apps that end users download without realizing that they are malware. In this webinar, we will focus on app targeting malware like Brestex. If we take a look closer at the trends from app targeting malware, we'll see there's two main ways of attacking users: stealing and monetizing personal information, and a more recent trend of performing fraud on victims' devices. These are performed by exploiting Android services such as accessibility services and overlays. Asking whether you should be concerned about malware is a valid question, and to find the answer, we do not actually need to look far. Studies after studies have discovered that the number and sophistication of mobile malware attacks are on the rise, given that there are tens of thousands of malware samples that might target one single banking application. As you can see from the list at the right side of the screen, it is not surprising that many developers are confused and puzzled on how and where to start in protecting their Android applications. We can also see from multiple reports from the media, malware problem is real, and it is impacting users from all across the globe. From the UK, Singapore, Europe, and LATAM, mobile banking malware has caused millions of dollars worth of damage. And to make matters worse, malware attacks are vast not only in number, but also in frequency. ThreatFabric detects multiple serious malware campaigns in a short period of time, sometimes in a matter of weeks, sometimes it's in a matter of days, and it signifies the frequency and the scale of the malware problem. Now that we have established that mobile malware attack is real, Gerardo will run us through what he has discovered through his research over the past year. Take it away, Gerardo.
In order to understand the malware problem, we conducted our research. We had three main requirements. First, we wanted to study real malware. Second, we wanted malware focused on financial services like wallets or banking applications. And finally, we wanted to collect samples that were recent. So the oldest one was from 2019. In the end, we came up with 15 samples. We also tried to align with the threat intelligence report, focusing on the most common families. Looking at the results of our research, we can distinguish different attack methods. The most relevant one is accessibility abuse, which is used in different ways by malware, like getting additional permissions or becoming device administrator all by itself. It's also used as a synchronization mechanism in order to deploy other techniques like view injection, also known as overlays or activity injections. And also we found more classical methods like spying on the SMS or the screen. If we look at the anatomy of the malware attacks, we'll see that malware is mainly trying to get the sensitive data from the users. It can be done through different methods, like looking into the keyboard, inspecting the SMS, and also through the screen. For instance, the screen could be recorded. Malware could place some overlays on top of the victim application in order to control what user is entering. Also, a malicious keyboard could be used, but mainly it's used in accessibility services. Accessibility services that can be also used to perform some automated actions, like we could think of some malware performing a fraudulent transaction all by itself. Okay, so the fundamental piece of the attack patterns we have seen is accessibility services. They exist because there are users with special needs and they need some assistance. So to understand this, we can think of different applications running on the system which generates accessibility events. These events are got or captured by accessibility services, which process them in order to understand what's going on, so they can provide some assistance to the users. The malware developers are well aware of these possibilities that accessibility services offer. So malware will try at any cost to get these accessibility capabilities. And the way it tries to get them is just to by bothering the user. For instance, we can see here through notifications, toasts, also deploying web views prompt into the settings screen, as we can see here, so the user can enable accessibility services. So if malware deceives the user or the user finally grants these capabilities, then things start getting ugly. And malware starts acting. First, it will try to gain some privileges, like grant some permissions to itself. This can be done through clickers. Here we can see that from the moment that the user grants accessibility services, a lot of stuff starts happening on the screen. It's barely noticeable by the user, so they will probably not perceive anything weird, or for sure they will not know what's going on. If we were able to stop the service, we would see that the malware has managed to self-grant all those 4 permissions that we can see to the right there. More things that malware does at this step is to become a device administrator application. We can see here. There, the user grants accessibility services and something happens. This has been slowed down. In reality, it happens much quicker. So as I said, it's really hard for the user to perceive. And why malware does all this is basically to achieve persistence, because a device administrator app cannot be uninstalled, for instance. The administrator status needs to be revoked beforehand, so it can be uninstalled. But malware is gonna defend itself once it gets privileges. We can see here the user trying to revoke the device administrator status, but the malware is just using clickers to click right afterwards to prevent this from happening. Another example, the malware will not allow either the user to access the application settings in order to prevent some potential action like permission revocation or whatever. Other actions like doing factory reset are often not allowed to. Okay, so we have seen some protective actions that malware does when it gets accessibility capabilities, but let's see now how the attacks can be built by using these capabilities, the offensive side of this. So one possibility is to use keyloggers in order to get everything that the user is typing, including passwords or sensitive information like card payment data. Let's see here an example. We can see that the email or the password can be captured. Let's see now another potential attack that they can do. They know what's going on the screen, so they can click their way to the transfer screen. And once there, they can fill in just the payment details like the recipient, the account number, the amount, etc. They can even enter any required code. Okay, more strategies more methods malware uses. It can use accessibility to synchronize actions to know when's the right moment to do something. For instance, it could just draw an overlay on top of a specific activity in the victim application in order to steal the card number, expiration date, CVC, etc., the sensitive data. This can also be done through an activity injection by triggering an activity on top of the victim with the same purpose, to stealing the sensitive payment data. It can be this, or also it could be a login screen. But injections, and in particular overlays, can be used for other purposes aside from stealing data. They can be used to mislead the user into believing that something's happening. We can see here an example where the malware is trying to perform a fraudulent transaction, so the application requires the PIN code. So the malware is just placing an overlay to cover this message. We see the overlay just to try to deceive the user into believing that it's a authentication just to sign in, not to authenticate, not to allow any transaction. Okay. So here we can see an overview of all the methods we have seen so far. So once again, the cornerstone would be the accessibility services, which are used to build other attacks. There is a defense step, like getting additional permissions, getting or becoming device administrator to achieve persistence, and also using clickers in a defensive way to prevent anything dangerous for the malware from happening. But there is also the offensive perspective, of course. So keyloggers can be used by using accessibility services to retrieve sensitive information. Malware can also automate actions through clickers, also for the attack perspective, like performing a fraudulent transaction. And also, accessibility can be used to coordinate the deployment of other techniques like UI injections, overlays, or activity injections. We will not cover all the possibilities during this presentation, so again, you can refer to the Security Research Center for further details. Okay, let's talk about countermeasures. Let's start. One primary approach could be, okay, let's look at what is installed in our device. In particular, let's pay attention to those activities which have accessibility services enabled. And then let's define some criteria in order to determine if an application is suspicious or not. So the first strategy is just to use an allow list. We could define something like this, some applications that use accessibility that we trust. So what we could do is just to get a list of all those accessibility services that are enabled and just check if they are on the list or not. Another approach is, okay, we could say there can be system applications using accessibility services. Okay, we can trust them. So for this, we could just iterate across the list of enabled accessibility services, and we will just check if they have the flag system set or not. If it is set, then we would just trust that particular application. This could be a possibility. Another possibility is, okay, so we have seen a common pattern for malware is as soon as they get accessibility capabilities, they will become device administrators for persistence and also get some other capacities. Okay, so we could use this to spot some potentially dangerous application. We can get a list of device administrator apps like this. And again, we will iterate the list of enabled accessibility services and check if there is one of them which is in the list of device admin apps. More possibilities. Okay, we have heard many times the case of dropper applications that are on the Google Play Store. They do not look suspicious at all. But once they get installed in the victim's device, the actual malicious payload is installed. It can be some module of the application, or it can be a different application. So we can use this in order to identify potential dangerous applications as well. We need to define a list of trusted installers like Google Play Store, Samsung Market, Huawei Market, etc. And again, we will iterate across the list of enabled accessibility services, and we will just check the installer if it's in the list or not. If they are not in the list, we will not trust this application. Okay, so we have seen that some common patterns and common behaviors, like these defensive actions that malware does, like getting additional permissions or becoming device admin. We can use this in order to identify that there are potentially dangerous applications installed on our device. Okay, let's try to elaborate more on this. Let's see if, let's explore another approach, which is blocking accessibility capabilities. So the first question is, can we actually block? Can we make sure that we can counter and prevent accessibility services from acting against my application? Can we make sure that a keylogger is not going to work or a clicker is not going to work on my application? We need to answer a second question. We need to question about if it is a good idea or not. Why? Because accessibility services, they have a reason to exist, right? They are there just to provide additional assistance to users that need it. So is it a good idea to use this kind of countermeasures? So obviously not. We want to provide security for all the users. We don't want to sacrifice the experience of anyone. So what? Can we use blocking countermeasures or not? Well, if we find a way to determine whether a particular user needs this assistance or not, then we could potentially, if we find that a particular user does not need accessibility services, we could deploy more aggressive protections, right? So, okay, this is an example. We could propose a test where the user is just seeing and listening instructions like, okay, your profile is being configured. Just please wait for a few seconds. And next, there is this on the screen where the user is requested to click on a particular button, for instance, number 2. So there are two possible outcomes here, right? Users that do not need assistance, they will probably click on button number 2. So we will conclude that these users do not need assistance. We can go all out against accessibility abuse here. And if a user needs assistance, okay, maybe they will do not anything, as they were told just to be waiting for the process of configuration to be finished, or they could maybe click on all the buttons. So in this case, we would conclude that we need to restrict ourselves to those countermeasures we have already seen, those identifying suspicious applications. We can, just to be sure, we can repeat this test a few times. Yeah, there is an important detail here. Maybe you are already thinking of it. Malware could click here, right? Could maybe, if they are requested to click on button number 2, they can click on button number 3. So we conclude that we cannot go with aggressive methods. So what? Okay, so we will actually use one of these aggressive methods to block any clicking on these buttons. Okay. This is just an example. We could, for instance, simply ask the user, do you want accessibility services to work on this application? So the user could just choose, or if there is no clicking after 10 seconds, we just take it as a no. Again, these buttons need to be protected. So we need to be creative here, right? Again, the purpose, the goal is to not sacrifice the experience of any user. So we need to get trade-offs when provided security. Okay, so let's see what we can do to block, for instance, keyloggers. So let's study how it works, how the attack works. Okay, so the attacker is basically getting events, and they have two ways to get access to the text being typed on a particular field, like email or password, whatever, these two. So what can we do to prevent this from happening? Okay, so if we look at the scientific literature, we will find a paper from 2017 where they basically say that it is possible to filter the information at the source. So from my application, I can control what information goes outside to be reached by accessibility services. One of the ways to achieve this is by using accessibility delegates. So how can we do this? Okay, so let's suppose we have a sensitive view. We can retrieve it programmatically from its ID. And we just have to set a delegate, this delegate. And this delegate, this is our class. Okay, this is a class that needs to inherit from accessibility delegate. And we will have to define two callbacks, these two. And inside, what we have to do is just to remove any text. And as a result, no text will go outside. Okay, let's see what happens. The user's typing, and this is all the malware gets. All right, how about clickers? So about clickers, okay. So yeah, we have said that malware is aware of everything that is going on the screen. And they can also retrieve views and write on them or click on them just by using Android API. This is an example. We have a button identifier that is retrieve, and then we just say that we want to perform an action, a click. We want to click on that. How does it look like? Okay, so we've seen there is a user logging in. We saw something quickly happening. We didn't distinguish, but now that we are seeing it more slowly, we can see that something bad happened. So the malware perform a fraudulent transaction to the attacker. This is real speed, nearly imperceptible. And again, looking more in detail, we can see how the malware fills in the fields, receiving an amount, and clicks on the button. Okay, so what can we do to defend against this? So again, accessibility delegates come to the rescue. There is one more callback we can define just to prevent clicking attacks. Is this one. So if this callback is called, means that there's an accessibility service that is trying to do something on my application. So here we can just filter the action. For instance, if we get an action set text or click, we just discard them. We don't do anything. If there is some application trying to write on my application or click on a button for my application, I will not allow it. So let's see the result. Again, the user is trying to log in. And this time, there is no transaction. There's a notification saying that a clicker was identified in the transaction activity and it was detected and countered. Okay, let's see it again. Yeah. So clicker detected and counteracted in this activity. Okay, so let's get some perspective. We have covered the defensive techniques from the malware. And we have seen that against attacks like keylogin or clicker attacks, we can use delegates. Okay, so let's see now what we can do about injections. So the first type of injection. So we have two types of injection, right? View injection, that are also known as overlays, and we have activity injections that we will see afterwards. Okay, overlays. So there are different types of overlays. We can have transparent overlays in the sense that if the user touches, the touch is going through the overlay back to the layer underneath. We can also have overlays that do not let these touches go through, so they are consuming the touch. By the way, this possibility is not allowed. It's not possible to capture a view, process it, and let it through. It is a security mechanism from Android. Otherwise, imagine how easy it could be just to deploy an overlay on top of a keyboard or something. Okay, so let's think about the non-transparent overlays. So, okay, this could be a full screen overlay, but what happens if the overlay doesn't take the whole screen like this? Okay, so this can happen, that the touches just go to the view underneath. But it could also happen that the overlay is blocking the touch from going through. So even if if the user is not touching directly the overlay, it's going to consume the touch anyway. So in the end, we have these 4 possibilities, more or less. Okay, so let's talk about countermeasures. Well, the first one that was introduced by Android on Android was flag window is obscure. Basically, this allows to detect what is called full occlusion. It means that on top of a view, there is an overlay that was touched, and the touch went through to the view. So we will be in the cases where the touch goes to the layer underneath. So there's 2 cases. And the next improvement was flag windows partially obscure. This allows to detect also what is called partial occlusion. It means that the view is not directly covered by an overlay, but the overlay is there. And we, even though the occlusion is not full, we can anyway detect that the overlay is there. But for this, again, we need to get the touch. So it applies for the same 2 cases. Later on Android 12, a new improvement was implemented, and it's just the possibility to hide any overlays and any non-system overlay. So it can be applied for all the cases. So yeah, at this point, what happens in these 2 cases if the operating system version is older? What happens for versions previous to Android 12? So, well, for this case, yeah, we have another countermeasure, which is called window punching. It can be used for these 2 cases when the touch never reach the view we want to protect. Okay, so we have a summary here. So yeah, basically, we can always hide overlays. For the cases when the touches go through, we can apply the flags, these 2, here and here. And when the touches do not go through, then we can apply window punching. All right. Let's talk about this one, about window punching, what it is. So it was proposed in 2016 on a paper, and yeah, basically it is about simulating touches across the screen. They can be simulated across the whole screen, or they can be localized at a particular area, like username field, password field, or buttons. So let's see the mechanism. We will simulate touches. We can call it throw punches. The X location ideally will be random. So X and Y coordinates will be randomized, and we will use the instrumentation API. Okay, so if one of these touches that we are simulating, okay, a punch, if it touches something that does not belong to our application, then we will get a security exception. Why? Because we are not allowed to touch other applications, right? So what if we see that this happened? Then we know that there was something on top our application that is not our application, so an overlay. Okay, let's see how this looks like. So in this screen, we have the whole screen. We are doing window punching across the whole screen, but also on the password area. So you just saw here, we deployed an overlay, and when we placed it on top of the password field, we saw a toast here. We can see it again. No detection. We get the overlay. Now we detect it on the screen, but not on the password field. We move it on top of the password field. Now it becomes serious. We detect it. We show a toast. We move it away. Okay, it's only detected on the screen, no longer on top of the toast or on top of the password. We remove the toast. We remove the overlay. No detection again. Okay. So let's get back to the overview of the attack methods. We have provided also a countermeasure for the overlays, different types of countermeasure. There is one more method that we need to cover, activity injections. So let's see what it is, how it works. So, okay, the malware is installed in our device. It obtains capabilities, accessibility capabilities. It becomes device administrator, gets extra permissions, etc. So it will also start collecting information like what are the applications installed on this device. This information will be sent to the server. The server will say, hey, okay, we've got a few targets among these applications. So keep an eye on them and just tell me when you see some of them executing. So at some point, there will be one of the targets executing, and the malware will quickly tell the server, hey, there's this application executing. Please get the URL for the injection for me. Okay, so the injection is passed to the device, and the malware just will generate a web view and will load the injection through the URL. And as a result, so something like this can happen. So anything that the user writes here will be controlled by the attacker. So at the end, the attacker will have collected all this information. It's important to notice that this can be triggered at any time. So this is an example for stealing court information, but we could also have a login application, a login activity, login screen. So let's see it again. So the user is going to authenticate, and as soon as the login activity gets to the screen, the malware injects another activity, which will control the user input. Okay, so the good news is that window punching also works here to detect activity injections. What can we do when we detect an activity injection? We cannot crash as we do usually for other types of protections, because the malware doesn't care, right? The malware will just the malware will have its injection on top, so it will steal the information. So one possibility is just to, if we detect the injection, we will try to warn the user, trying to prevent them from entering any sensitive information, right? We have different approaches, a toast, a notification. This could work, but we can go one step further. We can do something like this also. Yeah, exactly. So once we detect the injection, we get our protected activity and we get it back on top. So that it goes the injection and we get our activity back on top. Yeah, we can show messages to the user as well. Okay. So this is more or less a complete view of the different methods and how to address them. We have not described all the methods here, or the countermeasures, like these two I put here. So to get more details, again, you can refer to the Security Research Center just by scanning this QR code to get more details. So this is the most important part regarding accessibility services and everything that can be derived from abusing them. Let's quickly discuss about screen spying also. For instance, this is from a real malware piece. We can see here screen sharing service. We can see a URL here. So basically, the malware can capture the screen, can capture the camera, the microphone, and provide all this information through streaming to the command and control server. So you can imagine someone sitting in front of the PC, in front of a device, in front of an administration panel, and seeing a list of all the compromised devices and just clicking on one of them and getting real-time streaming of the camera, the screen, and the microphone. Okay, so I'm not gonna spend much time about this. Everyone knows about Flag Secure. It is used to prevent screenshots, to prevent capturing the screen. But there is just one problem. This is a known issue on older devices, older Android versions. There is a problem. So in the left, you can see an activity that is not protected, so we can see everything. To the right, we can see an activity that is protected, but we can still see the keyboard. We can still see what character is being written. Sometimes we can also see the cursor, so we can know what's written where. So yeah, this doesn't occur for more modern Android versions, but how we would also like to protect other devices, right? So one thing we can do is actually set flag secure on a keyboard, a dedicated keyboard that we embed in our application. So, okay, if we have our own keyboard, we will have some class that is extending input method service. So at some point, for instance here, we can just get the right window object and set flag secure. The result of this will be that at any moment that the keyboard appears on the screen, so anytime we are writing something somewhere, the screen will get black if we try to record it, right? This can be not much convenient in some cases. Maybe we just want we want to allow capturing the screen all the time, except for a particular very sensitive view. So, okay, we can be flexible. There is a solution for that. We can apply flag secure only for particular views or for a specific view. We just need to specify the identifier for that particular view, and only then we set flag secure, okay? So this identifier, we can find it in the runtime symbol list, the well-known R class. So we can see that this is the identifier for a particular view, the password view, the one we were looking for. So as a result, when trying to capture the screen, it will only get black when we are trying to type something on this particular view. Let's see an example. For instance, here, only one of the fields is protected. So this one is not protected. We can see everything. But when trying to type on the other one, we cannot see the screen at all. Okay, we can see it again. For the first one, we can see everything. but for the second one, we won't see what the user is typing. Okay, so Brian, I'll let you take care of the presentation at this point.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gerardo, for the insightful and very useful countermeasures presentation and also the attack techniques for malware. And I think to conclude before we go into the Q&A session, just a couple of takeaways. It is important for us to remember that the proper protection against accessibility and also overlay attacks on malware specifically is a shared responsibility. Because Apple and Google, for example, should provide secure API that developers can actually use. Users should avoid shady apps, installing them, using them, to be able to distinguish which are the legit apps and which are the illegitimate apps. And developers and also sometimes government are involved in educating these users. Developers should also mitigate the known risks. So it is very important for developers to ensure that you identify first the risk that you need to protect yourself against, so you can actually implement the right strategy against specific malware family or malware attacks techniques that you've probably encountered that are targeting your applications, and know what APIs are out there that you can actually use it and how to use it properly. And another thing to keep in mind is to ensure that your malware defenses maintains the user experience. I think it's very tempting to be able to just turn off the accessibility services. It's very convenient, but also at the same time, it makes the application unusable for people with disabilities. And lastly, it is important for you to layer your malware defenses against tampering and reverse engineering. In our latest blog, we actually discuss how one well-known Southeast Asian bank got their malware defense circumvented due to the lack of static and dynamic protection. And this highlights the importance of properly securing your application beyond just the malware defenses. Because at the end of the day, while one layer of defense is never going to be enough, so if you want to read more about that topic, you can scan the QR code above. And as Gerardo has presented before, the countermeasures presented in this webinar is only a subset of what is available for you to be able to properly secure your Android application from malware attacks. So you can find out more about the other countermeasures and also attack techniques in our Mobile Application Security Center, which you can find more information through the QR code right there. And that will be the end of the presentation. Now it is time for us to go into our Q&A session. Perfect. All right, I have a couple of questions that people have submitted throughout the presentation. And we will first start with the obvious one. Will the recording be available later? Yes, we will send all registrants the on-demand version of this presentation after this webinar concludes. But we're going to be able to send it out tomorrow. And it will also be available in the resources section of our website. So stay tuned to that. And the second question is, does DexGuard provide malware protection? In case you missed it, yes, DexGuard will have malware protection feature. So as an exclusive announcement to the participants here, we will be releasing DexGuard malware protection capabilities in May. But as you can see already from the presentation, you do not need to wait, as you can go to our security center and implement these malware defenses yourself. The second question is, how do code obfuscation and runtime protection protect against malware? I think first and foremost, code obfuscation and runtime protection prevent malware from being able to interact with your application, and it protects your anti-malware protection from being tampered with. As I've shared in the conclusion just before this, Southeast Asian Bank actually last year had their anti-malware protection, which they implemented into their Android applications, got removed by attackers. Before the attackers were able to repackage the application and distribute the malicious copy to the bank users. You can actually find it in our resources as well on the latest blog that I wrote on that topic. Next question is, can we get samples for testing? Unfortunately, we cannot share the malware samples for you to test for reasons that I'm sure you understand. However, we are more than happy to guide you and your team on how to implement the right countermeasures for this. The next question is, I presume the techniques of the protection presented here do not need to have DexGuard in place. Correct. You do not need DexGuard to be able to implement this malware protection. But again, as indicated through the case study that I have already presented, code hardening solution and runtime protection solution like DexGuard is complementary to the malware defenses that you will need to actually put in place to have an effective defenses against malware, because it's only one layer. Next question: how to contact us for further discussion? You can go to the contact pages of our website. So you can go to guardsquare.com, and you will be able to fill in a form there, and our team will be able to help you with that. Or you can also send us an email at helloworld@guardsquare.com, and our team will reach out to you in the shortest amount of time possible. All right, I think the next question is going to be for Gerardo. Gerardo, will these malware defenses work with all mobile operating systems?
So all the countermeasures that have been presented here are exclusively for the Android OS.
Right, so just for the Android OS. Right. I don't know if you have any more questions. Perfect. Yes. Next question would be, does session 2 contain the same information? Yes, it is just going to be a rerun of this presentation just to cater for the time difference. So no more information that will be presented on the second session. But as presented before, you can go to the Security Research Center if you want to learn more about other malware defenses, countermeasures, or other attack techniques that are not covered in this webinar. Next question is for Gerardo as well. Does disabling accessibility feature stops most of malware that are available out there?
Yeah, so as we have said, if you simply disable accessibility or prevent your application from working when there's some active accessibility service, in this case, we are forgetting about disabled users. So we want to protect the experience of everyone and provide security to all of them. So for us, this is not the right approach. So that's why we provided some ways, some techniques to detect the sensitive applications, and also a way to determine when we can go with more aggressive methods like blocking completely accessibility.
Indeed. So I think disabling the accessibility services is definitely a very convenient way to stop malware, most of malware, but also it comes at a cost of you discounting everybody else who might need that feature to be able to use our application. So I think it's important for us to be a little bit more creative and be able to still cater to the needs of your users. Next question: how do you detect if any malware is running on my mobile application? Any simple way by which a user can identify it? Gerardo?
Yeah, so if you want to try to identify if your application is running on a dangerous environment, you could use the techniques we have explained to detect suspicious applications. But keep in mind that our approach here is not to build an antivirus, it's just to protect the execution of our application. So from this in this approach, yeah, you could just try to identify suspicious apps.
Thank you, Gerardo. The next question is, will it work with the hybrid application like Flutter or Kotlin multi-platform alike?
So it depends on the countermeasure. We have now starting testing these hybrid applications. So the answer would be, in principle, yes. We need to see what particular tweaks would need to be applied.
Got it. Next question: do provided countermeasures cover all problems that can be found with enabled accessibility services?
So at least they cover the most relevant attack techniques that we have observed during our research. So we provide protections distributed in many layers, so we could be quite confident of preventing malware from working.
Got it. And the next question: does Google scan all apps before publishing on Play Store? I think the answer is yes. But as if you take a look at like other studies and researches, there are still applications that we consider dropper applications that might look legitimate and might even pass the Google scanning and vetting process and be able to still deploy the malicious payload after it has been installed in the user's device. Do you have anything to add there, Gerardo?
Yes, it's exactly what you said. So we assume that malicious applications can get to our device. So this is why we provide these countermeasures. We can see recent cases of applications bypassing special constraints for instance, from Android 13, that they get the payload to have accessibility enabled, despite of Google scans.
Got it. Thank you. And the last question, I'm not quite sure what it means, but how to harden Android devices to avoid such incidents. In the case of malware, I think we're talking about code hardening here. Jordan, can you talk a little bit more about how code hardening and runtime protection can prevent malware from interacting with the application in the first place?
Yeah, so again, we are not in the approach of an antivirus. So what we are trying to harden is applications, not the device. So yeah, the focus is on identifying what could be dangerous for our particular application, and we are not protecting the rest of applications here.
So the first question, this is actually more of a statement which we really agree with Olivier Rigaud that says that support for accessibility services might be mandatory and it might not be the wisest thing to actually block accessibility services altogether because sometimes the UK government, for example, or the EU and the US sometimes require a certain level of accessibility to be able to cater to the disabled users. And we do believe in this. And this is actually our approach. And we want to provide security while respecting the experience of all the user base, not just the majority of the user base. And we provide a first kind of countermeasures based on inspecting those applications with accessibility services enabled, checking for signs of suspiciousness. And we said that we only apply countermeasures blocking accessibility services if we have been able to determine that the user does not need or want accessibility services. And I think your concern on that implementing all of these techniques to better the apps might be time consuming and resource intensive. For those who are eager to actually just apply it themselves, that's why we actually want to empower you to be able to do that yourself through the Security Research Center and also through this webinar, providing you what is available for you to do it yourself. But also for those who don't have the time to implement this at all, as I have already shared in the beginning of the presentation, this card will actually have a malware protection in May that we're going to release then. So thank you, Olivier, and we agree with you. So the next question is this will be for Gerardo. When automated actions are being used, are they typically accompanied by automated actions such as copy and paste, or are there attempts to emulate human behavior input?
Yeah, so they basically just search to perform some action like clicking or filling in forms just to, for instance, carry out a fraudulent transaction. But it's true; it's not only just writing or clicking; it can be also copy or paste or cut, dismiss, expand, collapse. There are a set of several actions, but they will typically search to automate some action profitable for them.
Perfect. Thank you, Gerardo. And the next one, this is for you as well. Is this screen will render on top of application or browser? I think it's talking about overlay.
Yeah, I guess it's about overlays. So overlays will be synchronized typically with a target application, like a banking application. And it can be, depending on the purpose, they can be just trying to mimic the target application. For instance, a login view, login elements just to get the user's input, or it could be something to hide a particular element on the screen.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Srithar, for the question. The next one is how can we protect from rooted devices and applications like Magisk? So I think this is actually requires a different mitigation techniques altogether and cannot be solved with techniques we presented today. To protect your application from being installed or used on rooted devices, you will need to apply runtime protection techniques, namely root detection to your app. And just like the Southeast Asian bank that I mentioned earlier, without code hardening and runtime protection, using code protection tools like DXGuard, for example, your malware defenses can be undone and allows attackers to repackage your application and continue their malware attack campaigns as if nothing happened. Next question, this will be for Gerardo. Are special OS permissions required to detect or scan applications and their accessibility or device admin usage?
In order to get a list of those applications which have enabled accessibility services, you don't need any permission. The same to get the list of uh, device administrator apps, but to check if an application is a system application has a flag system, or if it is sideloaded, then you will need the query all packages permission.
Got it. Thank you, Anonymous, for the question. And next, we'll answer Pedro's first question. In terms of input detection, touch, overlay, are these methods for the view system or are we covered when using Compose?
Yeah, so Compose on hybrid apps is something we are still exploring and testing. I don't know much about Compose. I believe there's just some view. So I think you will just put that all the elements all together with this. But it's something we will get some conclusions and share them with you on the Security Research Center.
Yes. So the Security Research Center is going to be continually updated with new researches that we have found, including on the topic of malware as well. So stay tuned and you can pay a visit, and we'll definitely update you as well. Next question is from Stuart. Does window punching require shipping a production application with an instrumentation framework included?
So you just need to call the Android API, Android app instrumentation, and that's all. You don't need to include anything.
Right. So the API is android.app.instrumentation. And the next question from Anonymous is, are the protections you presented enough to completely protect against malware? So I think we've already established this. You need to layer this protection with code hardening and runtime protection to have a robust malware defense strategy. Next question is from Paulo. How the activity injection actually works? I mean, how the malware application put itself over the victim's app. Is it an exploitation of the accessibility services?
Yes, totally. So accessibility services are used to monitor what's on the screen. And as soon as the malware detects that one of the targets is executing, they will craft a particular URL and they will launch. So just imagine a service in the background. They will just launch, start one activity, and they usually use web views where they will load the content that mimics the target activity.
Right. Thank you, Paulo, for your question. And the last two questions. First one is from Alexander. Could the overlay countermeasures be used against a view that is below the UI of an app, for example, a camera injection attack? You're muted, Gerardo.
Yeah, sorry. So I have not thought about this. I guess if it is below, it won't be detected through window punching, for instance. It's something we have to look into.
Yes. Alexander, if you want to have more in-depth discussion about this, and you can definitely reach out to us, and our team will be more than happy to investigate this and see what else can we actually learn from this. Thank you for the question. And the last question is regarding DexGuard again. So does Guardsquare provide anti-malware protection? Yes, we're going to have it. We're going to add anti-malware, malware protection on DexGuard in May. So stay tuned to that for that. That will be the last question. I will give everybody another minute or two in case you have any more questions that you would like us to answer. If there is nothing else, just before we close, you can find all of this information again in our Security Research Center on our website under the resources page. And alternatively, should you have any further questions regarding malware, please do not hesitate to contact us as well. Our team will be more than happy to provide you with additional information. And thank you so much for joining us in this webinar, and we look forward to welcoming you in the next ones. I wish you have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.